Officer Daniel Reyes was the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to command respect. In the small Texas town of Stillwater, he'd spent nearly a decade building a reputation as a clean, reliable, and sharp-witted cop. He never lost his temper, never pulled his weapon without cause. But above all else, what set Daniel apart was his bond with his canine partner, Rocco, a massive German shepherd trained to detect narcotics, track fugitives, and sense danger before it happened. 2. The Force, they were legends. To the town, they were protectors. But legends can shatter in a single night. The call came in at 11:47 p.m., just as Daniel and Rocco were about to sign off after a quiet patrol shift. A local gas station clerk had reported a black sedan sitting idle behind the abandoned construction site on Mills Road. No plates, tinted windows, engine running. Suspicious, but nothing extraordinary. Still, Daniel didn't hesitate. He radioed dispatch and rolled out. As the cruiser approached the location, Daniel felt something twist in his gut. Rocco shifted in the passenger seat, ears pricked, letting out a low growl. That growl, Daniel had learned, meant one thing: something was off. He parked 20 feet back, flipped on the spotlight, and slowly approached the car with Rocco staying put, but alert. The driver's window was down 2 inches. No movement inside. Daniel tapped the glass with his flashlight. "Stillwater PD, roll down your window, please." Nothing. He knocked again. The window slid down halfway. Then everything exploded. Bang. The gunshot ripped through the quiet. Daniel staggered back, his hand flying to his abdomen. He'd been hit. Another flash, bang, missed his shoulder by inches. The world spun. Sirens hadn't even had time to echo yet. Rocco reacted before his handler hit the ground. With a snarl, that sent chills through the dark. He lunged at the shooter, who was already out of the vehicle and bolting toward the woods. Rocco chased but skidded to a halt halfway. Something else pulled him back. Daniel. He was motionless now, blood soaking his uniform, lips barely whispering. "Stay!" Rocco turned, ears flicking, then sprinted back. He nudged Daniel's face, barked frantically, circled him, then stood over his body, guarding him from the night. Minutes passed. Then red and blue lights painted the trees, but what greeted the responding officers wasn't what they expected. Rocco wouldn't let anyone near Daniel. He growled, low, guttural, primal, at his own fellow officers. 2 tried approaching, calling, his name giving the canine command to stand down. Rocco didn't budge. One officer tried stepping closer, only for Rocco to bare his teeth and let out a bark so forceful it startled even the medics. "He's never done that before," said Officer Lena Vasquez, Daniel's friend. "Something's wrong. He's not just guarding, he's warning." After several tense minutes, it was a rookie named Miles Jensen, fresh out of academy, whom Daniel had mentored, who managed to kneel from a distance and speak softly. "Rocco." "Buddy, we need to help him. It's okay, we're friends." Rocco's ears twitched. His growl softened. Then, like a soldier reluctantly stepping aside, he backed off just enough for paramedics to reach Daniel. They loaded him into the ambulance. Lights flashing, but Rocco tried jumping in after them. Officers had to hold him back, his claws scraping the concrete as he whined, fighting their grip. His cries were the sound of something more than loyalty, something desperate. The cruiser returned him to the department's K9 kennel, but Rocco didn't sleep, didn't eat. He stared at the gate like he knew it wasn't over, and that's because it wasn't. Hours later, before dawn, he broke out. He wasn't running aimlessly. Rocco had a destination, a reason, and he wasn't chasing a scent. He was chasing the truth. Stillwater PD was in chaos by dawn. One of their own was in intensive care. The shooter had vanished. And Rocco, the department's best-trained canine, had broken free from a locked kennel, cleared a 10-foot fence, and disappeared into the morning fog. But Rocco wasn't lost. By 6:15 a.m. he had returned to the scene of the shooting, exactly where Officer Daniel Reyes had fallen. A passing sanitation crew spotted him digging furiously near the base of a flickering street lamp. His paws were raw, his chest heaved, and when officers approached, expecting a traumatized dog, they quickly realized this wasn't random behavior. Rocco had found something. Buried beneath the dirt, wedged in the grass, was a small metal flash drive wrapped in black electrical tape. At first glance, it seemed out of place. Why would a USB drive be hidden under a street lamp at a crime scene? But something about it sent chills through Officer Lena Vasquez's spine. She remembered what Daniel used to say, "If anything ever happens to me out there, don't assume it's just bad luck. Look deeper." The drive was immediately turned over to internal affairs, but things started getting strange within hours. First, Daniel's body cam footage from the incident went missing. Then the digital dispatch logs were found to be incomplete. The specific 11:47 p.m. call that sent Daniel to Mills Road had been deleted, scrubbed clean from the records. At the hospital, Daniel remained unconscious. Tubes and machines kept him breathing. Doctors said it was touch and go. Elena Reyes, Daniel's wife, never left his side. And neither did Rocco. After being retrieved from the scene, Rocco lay silently by the ICU doors, whining lowly every time someone walked past without stopping to update him. "He's waiting for permission," Elena whispered. Like Daniel, told him to stay, and he's still following the order. That afternoon, Elena received a personal visit from Captain Mitchell, the department's acting chief. He was polite, respectful, but something about his words made her blood run cold. "Eleanor, we believe Daniel may have stumbled onto something sensitive. Until we know more, I'd ask you not to speak with the media. The department's reputation is at stake." Her eyes narrowed. "And what about Daniel's life?" The captain said nothing. Later that night, as she sat at home clutching her husband's blood-stained badge, Rocco walked to the corner of the room and pawed at Daniel's gear bag. He kept returning to one pocket again and again, whining, then biting the zipper until Elena gave in and opened it. Inside was a crumpled envelope. No return address, no contents. Just one word written on the back in black ink: Klein. Sergeant Brent Klein, once Daniel's direct supervisor, now quietly demoted to night shift patrol months ago. No explanation had ever been given. Elena's hands shook. Something was terribly wrong. She tried contacting Klein that night, but his number had been disconnected. His home empty, his car gone. His neighbors hadn't seen him in days. When Elena brought the envelope to Internal Affairs, they brushed it off. "Might just be a coincidence," one agent said. "No reason to assume it's linked to your husband's attack." But she wasn't convinced, not even close. And Rocco, who kept circling the living room, ears pricked and alert, wasn't convinced either. That evening, a knock came at the door. A man in plain clothes stood outside, flashing a badge. He claimed to be with a federal task force, said he needed to speak about Daniel. Urgent information, he insisted. But something about his badge was off. Eleanor had grown up with a father in law enforcement. She knew fakes when she saw one, so she did the one thing her gut told her to do. She let Rocco decide. She opened the door just a crack, and the moment the man stepped closer, Rocco lunged, teeth bared, snarling like a wild animal. The man backed off fast. Didn't even wait for an explanation. He sprinted down the steps and into a black SUV. No plates. Rocco stood at the window long after he was gone, his ears still twitching. This wasn't just about Daniel anymore. This was about something much, much bigger. By the third day after the shooting, the small town of Stillwater felt like it was holding its breath. Daniel Reyes remained unconscious. Machines kept his vitals steady, but his condition hadn't improved. Meanwhile, Rocco had refused every meal offered to him since the attack. He only left the front of Daniel's hospital room to sit beside Elena. His behavior increasingly erratic but focused, like he was waiting for something no one else could sense. Elena wasn't just waiting. She was searching. The envelope with Klein written on it haunted her. Her instinct screamed that it wasn't just a name, it was a direction. But Internal Affairs had filed her report and gone silent. When she called to follow up, she was met with vague reassurances. "We're working on it," one officer told her. "Please don't interfere. Let the system do its job." But the system had already failed, and the cracks were growing wider. First, the body cam footage, initially claimed to be missing, was declared corrupted. The department's tech team said the memory had been damaged during the incident, and that nothing could be recovered. That explanation didn't sit right with Eleanor. Daniel had always double-checked his gear. If there was anything he was meticulous about, it was evidence. Corrupted wasn't a glitch. It was an excuse. She met with Marcus Lane, an independent investigative journalist she had trusted from her days working in legal advocacy. Elena told him everything. The deleted dispatch log, the envelope, the man with the fake badge. Marcus didn't need convincing. "I've covered enough of these," he said. "This isn't incompetence. This is a cover-up." That night, Marcus pulled traffic camera footage from near the shooting scene. And that's when they saw it. At 11:46 p.m., Daniel's cruiser drove up Mills Road, lights flashing. A minute later, a second vehicle followed. No lights, no sirens. The car belonged to Sergeant Brent Klein. He was on leave. He had no business being there. And yet there he was, trailing behind Daniel like a shadow. Even more disturbing? Klein's vehicle never appeared leaving the scene. The camera on the opposite end of Mills Road, normally monitored 24/7, had gone offline for exactly 15 minutes after Daniel's arrival. When it came back on, only emergency vehicles were present. That narrowed the window perfectly. Klein had been there during the shooting, but he had vanished before help arrived. At sunrise, Elena drove to Klein's last known address. The home was vacant, his mailbox overflowing. A neighbor remembered seeing someone load bags into a truck 2 nights prior. "Didn't look like him, though," the man said. "Taller, mean-looking, drove a government SUV." It wasn't much, but it added fuel to what Elena and Marcus were beginning to uncover. A pattern. Daniel had been building a case. A quiet one. He hadn't told Elena everything, but he'd left breadcrumbs, like the envelope, and possibly even that buried flash drive. He'd always said if he went down, someone needed to finish what he started. Rocco hadn't stopped circling Daniel's police gear since the attack. That night he clawed again at the supply bag, and this time Elena found something tucked behind the inner lining. A second flash drive, almost identical to the one recovered at the scene. She and Marcus plugged it into an isolated laptop. What they found changed everything. It was surveillance footage, grainy, time-stamped from a month ago. It showed 2 officers, one clearly Klein, meeting behind the Stillwater impound lot. They transferred something from a department cruiser into a black duffel, bundles of cash, plastic bags, a weapon, and then something chilling. Klein turning to the camera, Daniel's hidden camera, and mouthing a word. "You're dead." Elena's stomach turned. She now had proof that Daniel had been marked, but someone else knew this footage existed, and they were already trying to erase every trace of it. This wasn't just an internal problem. This was a conspiracy, and it had infiltrated the very badge Daniel had sworn to uphold. Elena could barely breathe as she stared at the grainy footage on Marcus's laptop. The video was old, unpolished, but damning. Sergeant Brent Klein, a man Daniel once trusted with his life, had been caught on camera stealing narcotics, cash, and a service weapon from the department's evidence room under the cover of night. And he wasn't alone. The second officer in the video couldn't be identified fully. His face stayed in the shadows. But the shape of his body, the subtle limp in his right leg, and the patch on his uniform told a story Elena didn't want to believe. It was Captain Mitchell, Stillwater's own police chief, the very man who had visited her just days ago with concern in his voice and lies in his eyes. Rocco let out a low growl as the image froze on Mitchell's profile. He had been lying at Elena's feet, unusually still, as if sensing the weight of the moment. His ears twitched, his muscles coiled tight. Elena reached out to pet his head, but Rocco suddenly stood up, pacing the room with purpose. He stopped, at the front door, staring at it as if expecting something, or someone. "I think he knows," Marcus muttered. "Knows this isn't over." They had to move fast. Elena grabbed the flash drive and stuffed it in her coat. "We need to get this to someone outside Stillwater, someone we can trust." Marcus nodded. "I know a contact at the State Bureau, but we can't email this. Too risky." Rocco barked sharply, startling them both. Then came the knock. Not soft, not polite. A sharp, hard pounding on the door. "Open up. Stillwater PD." Eleanor's blood ran cold. Marcus shut the laptop. Rocco was already growling, his body planted between Elena and the door like a living shield. "Open this door now, Elena," the voice barked again, more familiar now. "Captain Mitchell." She backed away, pulling Marcus with her. "They know," she whispered. "We waited too long." The door handle rattled. Heavy boots thudded outside on the porch. "I'm going to break it down," Mitchell shouted. "You're obstructing a criminal investigation." But Elena wasn't just some scared widow. She had Daniel's instincts. And Rocco. She opened the back door silently, gesturing for Marcus and Rocco to follow her through the yard. Just as they slipped into the alley, they heard the front door splinter. Mitchell and 2 officers stormed inside, guns drawn. Elena's heart thundered as they ducked behind a neighbor's hedge. They needed a car, and fast. Marcus yanked out his keys. "My van's 2 blocks down, let's move." They ran. Rocco led the charge, sniffing the air, alert for anyone nearby. Twice he halted suddenly and redirected them down quieter side streets. He was tracking more than scent. He was reading the streets like Daniel taught him. When they reached Marcus's van, they barely had time to jump in before headlights appeared behind them. A black SUV. No plates. Rocco barked furiously as the SUV accelerated. "Hold on!" Marcus shouted, slamming his foot on the gas. The chase through Stillwater's outskirts felt surreal, like a movie scene shot in the wrong town. Elena clutched the flash drive, praying the truth it held would be enough to survive the night. The SUV gained on them fast. Then, out of nowhere, tires screeched. Another car barreled through the intersection, forcing the SUV to swerve hard. The black vehicle slammed into a utility pole, metal crunching on impact. Marcus didn't slow down. The time they crossed the county line, Rocco was at the window, ears forward, eyes locked on the road ahead, guarding not just Elena, but the truth his partner had nearly died to uncover. When they finally pulled off into a truck stop diner, the adrenaline still hadn't faded. Rocco sat at the booth beside Elena, never taking his eyes off the door. She looked down at him, then at the flash drive in her hand. "This isn't just about Daniel anymore," she whispered. "This is about saving everything he believed in." Rocco leaned into her side as if he understood every word. Outside, storm clouds rolled over Stillwater. The real storm, though, was just beginning. The truck stop diner on the edge of the county line was quiet, just a few truckers nursing coffee and a waitress wiping down tables. To everyone else, Eleanor looked like a tired widow with a loyal dog and a friend offering company. No one would have guessed she was sitting on a flash drive that could unravel a criminal conspiracy inside Stillwater's own police department. Marcus had already made the call. His contact at the State Bureau, Agent Dana Wexler, was en route. But still, 2 hours out, time they didn't have. Rocco hadn't relaxed once since they arrived. He stood by the window, staring into the parking lot like he was waiting for something to come through the shadows. His ears twitched with every shift of wind, every creak of tires, and then, without warning, he growled. Elena's heart dropped. "Rocco!" Before she could say more, he bolted through the diner's front doors and into the lot. Marcus jumped to his feet. "Something's wrong." They rushed outside. Across the lot, a man had just stepped out of a silver sedan, pretending to check his engine, but his jacket fell back just enough to reveal a sidearm and a patch. Stillwater PD Rocco didn't hesitate. He charged the man at full speed, teeth bared. The officer raised his weapon, but before he could aim, Rocco lunged, slamming into his arm. The gun clattered to the pavement. Marcus tackled the man from behind, pinning him. Elena kicked the weapon out of reach. A crowd was starting to gather, cell phones raised. The man tried to fight, but it was useless, and that's when he said something that sent ice down Elena's spine. "You don't know who you're dealing with. He's bigger than all of you." "Who?" she demanded. The man smirked. "He's been cleaning up this town since before your husband put on a badge. And your dog, he'll be next." Rocco barked wildly in his face, as if daring him to try. Sirens wailed in the distance. Not Stillwater's. State troopers. Marcus looked up, finally breathing. Agent Wexler must have called them ahead, thank God. The officer was taken into custody. His badge and ID were fakes, but the SUV from the earlier chase was linked to him. He wasn't just a rogue, he was a cleaner. The kind corrupt departments used to make problems disappear, but the flash drive was safe. That night, Agent Wexler arrived and took Elena, Marcus and Rocco to a secure field office an hour away. She was calm but deadly serious. "We've suspected things in Stillwater for years," she said, sliding the flash drive into her laptop. "But this confirms everything." The footage played again. She paused it on Klein's face. Then Mitchell's. Then she opened a sealed envelope from her briefcase and pulled out photos. Different angles, surveillance shots, bank records. "There's a name behind Mitchell," she said. "Not just the chief, not just Klein, the man. Bankrolling the entire operation. Deputy Commissioner Samuel Brent. He oversees 7 counties, including Stillwater. He's been moving narcotics, weapons and laundering money through evidence rooms and impound yards for over a decade." Elena's breath caught. "And Daniel, he found this." Wexler nodded grimly. "He got close, too close. That's why they sent Klein to silence him." "But he didn't finish the job," Elena whispered. Rocco lifted his head. That night, Agent Wexler arranged protective custody for Elena and Marcus. But Rocco refused to be separated from Daniel. He had to see him. And finally, after days of fighting, the hospital agreed to let the dog into Daniel's room. He padded softly through the doorway and leapt up beside his partner's bed. Daniel still hadn't woken. His face was pale, lips cracked. Machines beeped quietly. Rocco pressed his head gently against Daniel's chest, and that's when Daniel's fingers twitched, just once, barely visible, but unmistakable. Rocco let out a whimper, tail thumping once against the mattress. Daniel Reyes wasn't gone. He was coming back, and when he did, the truth was going to roar louder than any badge ever could. The sterile beeping of the heart monitor echoed softly in the hospital room. Elena sat in the corner, motionless, her eyes locked. On Daniel. He hadn't stirred again in hours, not since that single twitch of his fingers the night before. But Rocco remained curled beside him, his head resting lightly on Daniel's chest, rising and falling with each breath. Then Daniel moved again. His hand curled slightly, then slowly lifted toward Rocco's fur. It was weak, shaky, but purposeful. Rocco's ears perked up. He lifted his head, staring at Daniel with wide, alert eyes. "Daniel." Elena stood slowly, not daring to blink. Daniel's lips parted. A dry, broken whisper escaped. "Rock-co." Tears welled in Elena's eyes. She rushed to his side and grabbed his hand. "You're back, and oh my God, Daniel, you're back." He blinked, confused, groggy. "What happened?" "You were shot, ambushed. But you made it. You're safe now. Rocco never left your side." Rocco nudged Daniel's arm with his nose and let out a soft whine. Daniel smiled faintly. "Good. Boy." It took another day before Daniel was stable enough to speak clearly. Agent Wexler visited in person, flanked by armed agents. The moment Daniel saw her, he stiffened. "How far did it get out?" "Far enough to light a fire," she said. "Your flash drive helped us reopen 6 cases that were buried. We're building indictments, but Klein and Mitchell..." She paused. "They've disappeared. So has Deputy Commissioner Brent." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then they know I'm alive." "They do, and they won't stop until this is buried again." Elena leaned forward. "We have to go public." Wexler hesitated. "It's risky. The media will protect you, yes, but it'll also make you a target." Daniel's voice was hoarse but steady. "Then let them come. We're not running." But later that night, when the hospital floor emptied, a janitor wheeled in a cart that didn't belong. He wore a mop cap too low on his forehead and gloves too thick for someone cleaning. Rocco growled the moment he stepped into the hall. The man froze, then turned and bolted. Elena, sitting outside Daniel's room, saw it all unfold in a blink. "Security!" she screamed, but Rocco was already on the chase. The fake janitor barreled down the hallway, knocking over carts and IV stands, but Rocco was faster. He lunged, teeth clamping around the man's wrist just as he reached a stairwell. They tumbled together down the stairs. By the time Elena and 2 security guards arrived, Rocco was standing over the attacker, growling with protective fury. Inside, The man's jacket. They found a silenced pistol and a photo of Daniel with a red X over his face. It was a kill order from someone still pulling strings inside the force. The next morning, the story broke. Wexler's team leaked the surveillance footage, the documents Daniel had compiled, and even the assassination attempt. National outlets picked up the scandal within hours. Stillwater's police department fell under emergency review. Mitchell's accounts were frozen. Klein's home was raided, and whispers of Deputy Commissioner Brent's offshore accounts surfaced. But justice moved slow, and enemies still moved in shadows. Despite pressure to relocate under protection, Daniel refused. "I won't hide in the dark while they rebuild. I became a cop to protect people. This town still needs protection." Elena stayed by his side. So did Rocco. What no one expected was what came next. A town-wide march. Over 1,000 residents of Stillwater flooded Main Street, holding up posters of Daniel and Rocco, demanding accountability. Signs read, "A badge. Should protect, not deceive. And honor Rocco, protect the truth." And at the center of it, Rocco stood tall beside a slowly recovering Daniel, his head high, his tail still, his eyes sharp. He wasn't just a K9 anymore. He was the symbol of everything Stillwater had almost lost, and everything it now stood to reclaim. The mood in Stillwater shifted quickly from hope to unease. The media storm had triggered a wave of investigations, protests, and reforms. But beneath the surface, something uglier stirred. Anonymous threats flooded the State Bureau's inbox. Unmarked vans were spotted trailing Daniel's temporary safehouse, and more than once someone tried to hack Agent Wexler's communications. The system was fighting back, and it was fighting dirty. Daniel's body was still healing, but his instincts were sharper than ever. He stayed quiet publicly, moved locations, twice in 3 days, and kept a loaded sidearm close, something he'd never done casually before. Rocco never left his side. He refused to eat unless Daniel did, refused to sleep unless Daniel's hand rested on his fur. And he always sat facing the door. Elena knew something was coming, so did Rocco, but no one expected it to come from someone they trusted. It was Marcus, the friend who'd helped Elena decode Daniel's files, the man who'd driven them through backroads with the flash drive in his glove box. The man who claimed to have saved them had betrayed them. It started with a phone call Elena overheard late at night. Marcus whispered, "They still have the second drive. I'll get it tonight." "He won't know until I'm out." Elena froze in the hallway. Her hand covered her mouth. The second drive. The one Daniel had stored as backup and never told anyone about, except Marcus. She backed away slowly, heart racing, but the floor creaked. Marcus turned toward the noise. Their eyes met. "Elena," he said, his voice soft but cold. "You weren't supposed to hear that." He stepped toward her but didn't see Rocco barreling down the hallway like a missile of muscle and teeth. With a single snarl, Rocco lunged and tackled Marcus to the ground. Elena screamed. Marcus thrashed, but Rocco had him pinned, jaws inches from his throat. Daniel, limping and breathless, arrived seconds later. One glance at the scene told him everything. Marcus, sweat pouring, tried to speak. "Daniel, listen." "You lied to me," Daniel growled. "You sold us out." "I didn't have a choice. They came after my sister. Brent has her." That stopped everyone cold. Daniel stepped closer. "She's in danger?" "They said if I didn't get the second drive, they'd kill her. I was just buying time." Daniel stared into Marcus's eyes. The man's fear looked real. But Daniel had been fooled before. So had Rocco. This time it would cost them dearly. Before anyone could react, a bullet shattered the window. Then another. Gunfire rained into the safe house. "Down!" Daniel shouted, dragging Elena to the ground. Rocco shoved Marcus behind a table and stood guard, barking furiously at the shattered glass. Outside, a sniper. Daniel crawled to the wall, firing a single return shot. The gunfire paused. "Move now." Wexler's voice came over the emergency channel in Daniel's earpiece. "Extraction teams inbound, 1 minute." But then a second gunman appeared on the back porch. Marcus saw him first. "No." He shouted, leaping up, but it was too late. The man fired. A single shot aimed at Daniel, and Rocco Mudd took it. The blast echoed like thunder. Rocco stumbled, his hind legs buckled. "No!" Daniel screamed, crawling toward his partner as chaos erupted. Again. Wexler's agents stormed in seconds later, neutralizing the attackers, but Daniel only had eyes for Rocco. Elena knelt beside him, sobbing. Rocco lay still, blood seeping from his side. "Stay with me, boy," Daniel begged, his hands trembling. "Stay with me, please." Rocco's eyes fluttered, and then, just barely, his tail thumped once, a weak, defiant wag. The medics rushed in. Daniel refused to let go as they lifted Rocco onto a stretcher, oxygen mask already pressed to his snout. "He saved me," Daniel whispered, gripping his partner's paw. "He saved all of us." As the ambulance tore through the night, sirens howling, Elena stared back at the safe house, torn apart, riddled with bullets. The truth had shaken the town, but the war wasn't over yet, and the heart of it all lay unconscious, on a gurney fighting for breath. The emergency room was a blur of flashing lights and hurried voices. Elena gripped Daniel's hand, her knuckles white as the medics worked feverishly to save Rocco's life. Daniel sat stiffly, his gaze fixed on the stretcher where his partner, the dog who had never left his side, fought against the darkness. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the lead vet emerged, his face unreadable. "He's stable for now," the vet said. "But the bullet caused damage to his lungs and spine. We'll need to keep him sedated and monitor him closely. It's going to be touch and go." Daniel nodded slowly, swallowing the lump in his throat. Rocco had saved his life, and now Daniel would give everything to save his. Days passed in a haze of hospital visits and strategy meetings. Agent Wexler's team was closing in fast on Brent and his network, thanks to the evidence Daniel and Marcus had helped recover. Marcus, now cooperating fully, provided insider details that were crucial, but the emotional toll weighed heavily on all of them. Rocco, sedated but alive, lay in a kennel beside the hospital's veterinary ICU, surrounded by flowers, blankets, and notes from supporters across the country. A silent testament to courage and loyalty. Daniel and Elena refused to leave his side. Then came the day the phone rang at the safe house. Agent Wexler's voice was urgent. "We have Brent. He's been arrested at his private estate. The feds seized his assets, and the whole corruption ring is unraveling." Daniel exhaled deeply, relief washing over him, but it was tempered by Rocco's uncertain fate. A week later, as the sun filtered softly through the hospital window, Daniel sat beside Rocco's kennel. The dog's eyes fluttered open briefly, and he lifted his head weakly. "Hey, boy," Daniel whispered, voice cracking. "You're a fighter." Rocco's tail gave a faint wag. Elena smiled through tears. "He's going to be okay." Slowly, miraculously, Rocco began to improve. The courtroom was packed the day Brent and his accomplices faced trial. Survivors, families, reporters, and townsfolk filled every seat. Daniel took the stand, recounting the harrowing events, the betrayal, the attack, the truth uncovered by Rocco's relentless loyalty. The judge listened intently as video evidence was shown. When Rocco was brought in on a leash, still wearing his canine vest, the room erupted in applause. Brent's face was pale, his empire crumbling in public. Months later, Stillwater's police department underwent a full overhaul. New leadership, transparency, measures and community oversight boards replaced the old guard. Daniel was reinstated with honors. Elena began working with victims of police corruption. And Rocco? He became more than a canine. He became a symbol, the little dog who refused to leave his partner's side, the silent witness who exposed the darkness behind the badge. One crisp autumn evening, Daniel stood on the steps of the police station, holding Rocco's leash as the town gathered around. Children laughed and played, waving flags that read, "Justice for all." Elena stood beside him, proud and strong. Daniel looked down at Rocco, who wagged his tail happily. "You did good, boy," Daniel said softly. Rocco barked once, a clear, joyful sound that echoed through the square. And in that moment, Stillwater knew the truth. Justice wasn't just a word on a badge. It was loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a man and his dog.